We are a town that, on one hand, we have the financial industry, we have entrepreneurship, we have hustle. We also have the BS of press. I emphasize the C in capitalist. So I just want everybody to be clear. I care about the world. I am not, but I am a capitalist. You know, I think this is not, I don't like to align myself with these people because even though they're icons of American history, they also did terrible things to human beings. But it's sort of like the Carnegie or Rockefeller mindset, right? Like the idea that you can prioritize building great industry and know that you have an obligation to the broader community, right? We straddle that line in that some of our companies are solving problems for corporations, for customers, and they also happen to have a social good impact, right? There's a way to to solve a problem that's affecting people in mass and let the commercial outcome be one of the motivators and it still do good, right? I think that the challenge is that many companies, I mentioned this to you before, were built for a very small, technology companies, for a very small group of people and their first world problems, right? There are actually more people that have myriad problems navigating the United States and their community and services and all of that. And someone between the federal government that supports them, their own paycheck, they're willing to pay to have the friction taken out of their lives. So I don't think you're making a choice about social impact. I think that there are more social problems that you can build technology to address that will generate a return. It's hard for people to wrap their brain around it. I'm not going out there saying everyone should invest in social enterprises. I don't suggest that. I'm just saying that the option's available. And it's actually you're not making a hard and fast choice all the time.
Yeah, how much of your personal journey speaks to that? Because if I look at your resume, it's like you were either headed to government professionally or maybe even education, if you were to look at it from that lens. How much of your personal, journey and career speaks to your ability to be more insightful about social impact and its relationship to capitalism?
That's a great question. I think it's, I don't want to take too much credit for it. I think that a lot of people along the way pushed me to consider social impact as a core value for myself. And the reason why I describe it that way is that I grew up relatively poor, and when I got the opportunity, like, oh, I'm actually smart, I can do well on these tests, I bet you I can get into a good school, I was really focused on economic stability and not on impact. And along the way, people were saying, no, you're bigger than that. It's not just about the money. Think about this thing over here. And so I think less of career and more mentors have been the influence about keeping that front of mind. When I was in Congress as chief of staff, I managed $54 billion of science and technology investments. It's like, oh, okay, I can see how it stitches up nicely. But I never thought that I'd be in venture. I never thought I'd be in startups. I never thought any of those things would actually be a part of my life journey. It's been really about being aggressive about how much time I have on this earth, the level of impact I want to make, the mark I want to leave, and pushing myself to consider what best is in all that I'm capable of. So that's really what those circuitous choices have been about.
I see a Maisha at Afrotech and I see you walking down the hall. What sort of thing gets your attention when you talk to founders and you're like, oh, that's interesting, we should talk?
Yeah, so I approach this a little differently, primarily because I'm focused on the individual as the core of whether or not the business will be successful. And so I spent a lot of time trying to hear someone's personal story, which at first can feel off-putting and voyeuristic, but I'm listening for the journey traveled. I'm listening for that distance. Not that everyone has to have a hard scrabble background, I don't believe that, but doing anything for the long term is going to require resilience and sort of the breath training of a marathon runner. And the only way you can identify it is about the races they've run before they've met you. I think the other element is really clear vision about what they want to build. It doesn't all have to be sussed out, but I need to know this person has spent time with this idea and made choices about, I'm a little 2 inches to the left, not 2 inches to the right on this idea, right? I think a lot of folks want to talk to someone with money the moment they've got an idea that a few of their friends have said, that sounds cool. I'm listening for the person who's delved a bit deeper. They've read 5 books on the subject matter. They've used their network to find 2 engineers that would help them tinker a little bit. Like they're doing the work because that's what's going to take. And so that's what I'm listening for when I first meet an entrepreneur.
That sounds, in my experience, a lot like an angel investor who comes in super duper early before there's a product market fit, a defined market for this. And what is the difference to you based on that thesis between a VC and an angel investor, and how should founders be thinking about that? Right,
so the thing to think about for me, I've only done early stage. Even in Washington, a lot of the early work that we've invested in, the best they've got is a peer review paper that's indicating that. So I've only played in that space where I'm trying to have a conversation, understand the limited resources that I have, and figure out where should this fit in the broader portfolio. I'm not looking at product market fit and like how they're growing their customer. I don't do that as much. So that's a bias toward background for me. There's the rhetoric around how it's easier to construct a better deal if you play this early, but I'm actually more interested because I like to meet founders at this stage, even if I'm not investing in them, even if we don't do business together. I like to be in their world and journey for as long as they're building. So it's 100% a bias on my part. It sounds like angel investing because I'm speaking more about the people, but it's really about the thesis that we have about the individual being the beginning and end of the success of a company.
Relative to a lot of Black women who come into tech and perform because they've had to juggle a lot of things in life. And when you see studies that have shown that Black women do return multiples of their investment dollars, talk to me about what it means to you to see other Black women more of late start to see recognition as people who can make returns for investors and build great companies.
Yeah, I feel, that's a great question. I have mixed feelings about that, primarily because women of color have been, from a demographic perspective, the leaders in entrepreneurship for decades in the United States. And so it feels kind of late. It feels flat that we're being acknowledged. It's like, okay, all right. I mean, it's only been here for like forever. Like if you call back to Madam C.J. Walker, it's like, that's a long time to wait for someone to say, oh, you guys actually might be good.
Right.
I think for me, and I think it extends beyond just Black women. I think it extends, as I've mentioned before, it extends to young people in rural communities who are really incredibly capable and never get their shine. It extends to Black men, it extends to Asian women, and it extends to Hispanic people. It extends to all of us. Like, the idea that that on a basis of nothing else except the way I show up in the world, you would have doubt. I don't know. I'm not thrilled that it's being acknowledged, because I think that the value of that experience of being unacknowledged for so long is that we realize that it's not actually about acknowledgement. The power is in what we build. The power is how we connect to customers. The power is how we drive returns. The power is to the legacy that we lead and what we built. And that's really the thing that matters. And what I'm encouraged by is that more and more people are expecting not to be acknowledged and suiting up for it anyway. I mean, that's the thing that's most exciting for me.
Is it dangerous, and you'll see it every once in a while on Twitter, a founder will not out a name, but out a VC, the experience of with a VC.
Very recently,
Yes, and so is it dangerous for particularly Black women, but Black men also, to talk about their negative experience with VCs publicly?
Yeah, no, and I think about this a lot because I'm one of these people who, I mean, even by appearance, I suit up for the thing, and being very polite and respectful is a part of my personality. I thought about this. I don't think so. I think it's more valuable that folks are speaking up. I think there are two tracks. You can do it publicly, like in Twitter as the universe that you do it, and I think that that's more of a signal. It can be quite explosive, and I think that people have varying degrees. People who feel that they are being described in those negative experiences, right, as being the aggressor, the offender in the negative experiences, will have reactions, right? But the thing I've noticed, and this exists with entrepreneurs of all backgrounds, the really good ones figure out how to build a network and back channel that information all the time, right? So we have two choices, right? We have the lane to be explosive every now and again. I think that people who want to do that should feel empowered to do that and should be loud about that, because there is a narrative idealizing what it means to be an entrepreneur and a founder. There's a narrative idealizing what it means to be a venture capitalist. I think that the more disruption and honesty and sunshine we put on what it's really like, I think the better. It'll help people make smart choices. And then conversely, I think it encourages people to be more comfortable back channeling what it was really like to have a meeting with VCX or Banker Y or Angel Investor Z. Like, that's really important. The path to growth for people who have been sort of overlooked for a really long time is getting more and more comfortable about sharing information as candidly as possible. It's the only way you can decide how to do the right deal for you and how to avoid mistakes, is when someone says, I talked to that person, I don't think so, or this is what I learned and this is how you navigate that. Yeah. The more we practice and exercise that muscle of being candid, the better off we're all going to be, because it'll short circuit who we let into our deals for our very, very great companies, especially since the prices of our deals tend to be a lot lower, because we don't anticipate sort of a rush of capital when we're trying to build something.
Talk to me about venture capital specifically in New York. What's different about doing it here versus Silicon Valley or Chicago or in Atlanta? I've been
thinking about this a lot, and I have a good side of what's different and I have a bad side, and I'm happy to share both. I think that what's good about New York is the companies that we build, they tend to be a little bit beyond like team and dream. I think that has to do with New York's personality as a city, right? We're the financial capital of the world, we're fast. Yeah. The expectation of it being done yesterday is a very real thing that seeps into this community. And so people are more inclined, as opposed to in the Valley, to show up with a thing. This is the core idea fleshed out. This is how much money. I think that the investors are much more aggressive about getting an entrepreneur to prove out what they're doing before they write a check. I think that's good, right? That sort of validates what's being built. I think the downside in New York is also our personality. We are a town that, on one hand, is really good about, we have the financial industry, we have entrepreneurship, we have hustle. We also have, I'm gonna try not to curse. We also have the BS of press. Yeah, we're a community that marketing and branding is a thing that is a part of our world. So I share that to say that there's a lot in this community that is held up in the press as a successful company, as a strong venture capital firm, as people who care about diversity, and it's all just about all just an indicator of the last reporter they spoke to, not what they've actually done, right? And so it's both good and bad are byproducts of the personality of the city, but it's a very, very real thing.
More in recent years than ever, probably, there's more opportunity for diverse founders to get funded. We still got some ways to go.
Yeah.
And there's more opportunity for people who look like you and I to be in the seats that you sit in.
For sure.
Can you talk about the opportunity for people like us in the tech industry and the entire ecosystem and what you see?
I am just, I am super excited about where we are right now in terms of access to technology, and therefore what anybody can build, and therefore what anyone can invest in, and to the satisfaction of the customer people want to serve. Like, I'm super excited about that. Primarily, you mentioned earlier about the new recognition that women of color are getting as entrepreneurs. You know, I'm excited for it, but I'm glad they're late, right? The thing about it is that founders of color are people who aren't from the coasts. I see them as an overlooked and undervalued asset class, right? Their deals, the expectation for what they want to raise is a lot lower, right? Even when they're well networked, it's a lot lower. So the deals are cheaper to get into. And by every metric we've seen for the last 40 years, these founders work twice as hard just to get into the door. And so imagine a world in which the asset is overperforming but cheaper. Like, that's like a clear arbitrage opportunity, and as an investor, it's something that I want to spend all of my time focused on. I am excited about the fact that where in the past, or when I was growing up, right, I had to be in every engineering program and every advanced mathematics program in order to figure out if I was talented. Now a young person can get on YouTube on their phone and figure out how to code this, how to build that, where can I find a 3D printer to build out a prototype. Like, the access to test and learn, like, the barriers are much, much lower, right? We're removing all of these qualifiers that flawed people, because we're all flawed, created to decide who could build something great, and it's going to shift who gets to build the future, and it's going to be more aligned with our everyday needs and more aligned with what the problems that the masses are dealing with. And it tends to be people who are brown or queer or more femme and not from the coasts.
Just by sheer geography and space, not everybody can live in a Silicon Valley or New York.
Sure.
Right?
And they shouldn't.
And they shouldn't. And so there are many people in our audience and who are trying to build technology companies and are in Oklahoma or in Georgia or in Ohio or Kentucky. And what should happen in the ecosystem globally of technology and venture that pays more attention and gives more credit to those startups that could be incredibly viable but don't have the network to get to a person like you?
It's our game to lose. Invariably, right, what will happen is you can't stop a person on a mission with a clear vision. Is like a freight train. You can't stop it, right? It'll take them longer to get there if they're not networked and all that, but you can't stop it. And it's really our game to lose. I think that venture itself as a space is not as wanted as it once was. It's not as admired as it once was. People are getting more and more creative at what it takes to fund their companies. And so really I would flip the question. The real concern or the real urgency is on the part of investors and whether or not they are racing to get there, because those folks are going to build, right? It's not what it was 20 years ago, right? They have the capability to build. And I want to encourage those folks, those founders in Oklahoma, in Philadelphia, Mississippi, in Dayton, Ohio, to yes, it's hard, right? It's harder to find capital. It's hard to find people you want to collaborate with, but it's not the end of the world. People in New York are building offshore engineering teams. That means that people in Dayton, Ohio can too. And those offshore engineering teams are cheaper than you can find in New York and San Francisco, which means they're also cheaper for you in Dayton, Ohio. You follow? It's just a whole new world. And if you believe that your product, your technology should live in the world, there's a way to get there. Now, I think that some folks on the coast are being more and more open to discovering folks that are building in these communities, but High Alpha is not in New York, it's in Indianapolis, right? there are folks that are moving. Like there are whole hubs and communities in Denver, Colorado, right? There's a community being built in Salt Lake City, Utah. Like that's what's happening because smart people are waking up to the fact that you guys are out there and that it's our game to lose if we don't get in it. We should be rushing. We should be rushing to you. I think that will be the case for a period of time, and you can't encourage people to do the smart thing. They just have to figure it out. And I mean that to investors who are overlooking those communities.